Hello and welcome to the next installment of the Introduction to DAT Programming. In this video, we are going to talk about methods or functions, whichever way you decide to call them. It's either methods or functions. So let's get started. So what is a method? So a method is a block of code that executes together to perform some specific function. All right. So it can be any group of code that is combined to perform a specific function, either to return a value, calculate something, perform some function. Okay, so we can define a function outside of our main loop or inside of our main loop, it doesn't matter. So I can say void, which is the data type of the function or the method. So void actually means it's not supposed to return anything. So we can use print statements and everything inside of a void function. However, you can use all the data types we have to create a function. So we can have a function that will start with a bool. So when we have a bool, say is age equals something. So is age, then this function or method must return a boolean. So I can say true. Then this error goes away. So we have a void function already there. So this is a boolean function. We can have say a string. So this should return a string. We can have an int. So this should return some integer value. So or we can have a double. So this should return some double value. Okay, so you can use any of the data types as your return type for any method at all, depending on what your need is. Okay, so let's say I have two values, say int a equals maybe 12 and int b equals maybe 16. Okay, then I want to calculate the product or the sum or something like that, but then I don't want to do the same thing in the same method, which is the main function. Then I can define a separate function to do the addition, a separate function to do the multiplication, a separate function to do division, subtraction, almost everything I want to do. I can define a function to do this. So for the addition, I can say, since this is going to return some value, I can say that the return type is going to be an integer, since we have two integers. So I can say int add numbers. Then I'll say, okay, so for now I'm not going to return anything, so let me just say void. Then I can return something. Okay, but to be able to return this, so let me show you a function that let's say print something. Let's say print this is a dummy line of code. Okay, so if I want to see the output of this, I can just call the function which is print something. Okay, so if I run this, I guess this is a dummy line of code, right, which is this function being executed here. Okay, so that is one way of calling a function. Now this function, when something takes in no arguments, okay, there's no arguments. We have function arguments. In this case it's 0 because we are not passing in anything. However, we can specify that a function must take in some input and then give out some output. Okay, so we can say string. We want it to take in a string. All right, a string that's going to say some text. Then we want to print out some text. Okay, so we now have to supply this value that we want some text to this function call. So when we supply this, the error goes away, and when I run this, I get the same line as I supplied. This is a dummy line of code, so I can just remove dummy. So we see the difference and we run it, then I get this is line of code and this is a dummy line of code. Okay, so that is one way of calling a function. So you can call a function that has an input argument or no input arguments at all. Okay, so now that we know input arguments, so the input argument is just going to be like a variable, but then you can decide to initialize it or not. Okay, and then it is taken in during the function call. Okay, so add numbers, I'll take in two numbers, which is a and int b, because you can't add just one number, it has to be two numbers. And I'll say return, then maybe sum. Okay, so I'll just say int sum equals a plus b. Okay, so since this is returning something now, and I can change this to int, then we are good to go. But you can reduce these lines of code by just saying return a plus b, which is going to do exactly the same thing. So now if I call this function here, let me comment this out. If I call this function, so let me add a function that doesn't take in any input argument. Print something 1. So this is not going to take in any line code, and I'll just say this is a dummy line of code. Okay, so if I decide to say int sum equals add numbers, then I pass in a and b, then I print sum, and run this, I should get the sum of the two numbers, which is 28. Okay, so this is going to return a value which will be stored in this variable, and then we can print that value inside of this variable sum. Okay, so that is it. Remember that we gave this function or method two inputs, that's a and b, but it doesn't mean that the values we pass here must be named a and b. I can call this num1 and then num2. So I'll just pass in num1 and num2. This will work fine, provided that the number is an integer. Okay, so if I change this to bool, it's going to give me some error, or if I change it to say double, it's going to give me an error because a double and an integer are not the same thing. Okay, so the data type must be the same, but then the variable name can be different. Since suppose provided we are supplying the same input arguments, then we have no trouble. We just pass in the values and then it's going to spit out what it generates. Okay, so we can do the same for, let's say, division. So for division we can say, okay, let's do multiplication. So we can say, instead of just void, we can say it's going to be an integer and multiply numbers. Then we just say return. So when we are returning, we take in an integer a and integer b. Then we return a. Then the multiplication symbol is the asterisk in programming, as in that. So a asterisk b, which is a multiplied by b. And you return that. So you can call the multiply by saying int, then say product equals multiply numbers and pass in num1 and num2. Okay, so if we print the sum is, okay, the sum is, and the product is, we get both our output. So the sum is 28 and the product is 192. Okay, so that is basically what a function does. We can add as many lines of code as possible, but we can only return one thing, which must be the specified data type. In this case, an int. You can execute a for loop, an if statement. You can execute another function in another function. So inside of print function or print something, I can just add, after we've returned our value, before we return our value, I can say print something 1, then pass in the sum. So I'm just going to comment this out, return sum here, again print sum dot toString. Okay, because we are taking a string from this end, so I can just do this. I'm executing a function inside of another function. Okay, but bear in mind that this print statement is a function itself. Okay, so when we come to the that's code for print, it takes in an object. Okay, then it shows print to console. So print to console here is also a keyword that is used, but then it's abstracted to us. Okay, so you don't need to worry about those things. However, if you want to check it out, you just have to press Ctrl and then hit click. Now, since Python that is strongly typed, you get some of these code descriptions and everything from your that core, and then you can just hit Ctrl and click, and then it will take you to this code. Okay, so when we execute this and run it, we get 28, and the sum is this. Okay, so let me add some text that's going to say this is the text provided. Okay, and I'll just add this. So when I execute this again, we get this is the text provided, which is coming from the some text something one. being the 28 we passed, and then this is from the sum we called here and the products we called. Okay, so that is basically functions and what you can do with functions. So you can define functions anywhere. You can decide to define your functions before the main function and call them, or after your main function and call them. They are all fine. Okay, just you can do anything in a function. For loops, if statements, while loops, anything at all. Okay. Alright, so that's it for methods of functions. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support this channel. See you in another video.